Hi guys, my name is Blake. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm bringing you the Christmas Carol book tag. I was tagged by Jazz from RedPandaReads. I'll leave her channel link down below. She's absolutely wonderful. She's so enthusiastic when she talks about books. Thank you for tagging me, Jazz. Question 1, The Ghost of Christmas Past. A book that was a childhood favorite. And the books I have for that are The Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander. This is a 5-book series, and we're following this boy who's an assistant pig keeper, and he dreams of being a knight. If that premise sounds familiar, it's because it inspired Disney's The Black Cauldron film, which is my favorite Disney movie. I haven't read the series in 15 or 16 years, but I remember absolutely loving it. I really need to revisit these books because I have such fond memories of them, and they're really short and I could read them really quickly. I think that this series is super underrated. I never hear anyone talk about it. It originally came out in 1965, so that may be why I never hear anyone talk about it, but I still think that despite its age, it's still wonderful. Question 2, The Ghost of Christmas Present. A recent book that you think will become an all-time favorite. For this one, I have Storm My Archives by Brandon Sanderson. I read the first 3 books in the series this year, and I'm slowly chipping away through Rhythm of War, which is the 4th one. I absolutely loved the first one, but then when I read this one, the second one, Words of Radiance, it definitely solidified it as an all-time favorite for me. The world building is so expansive. It's everything that I've ever wanted in a fantasy book. The characters are wonderful and they go through some really difficult situations. The magic system is the most intricate thing that I've ever read. It's truly amazing, and I don't know if there are very many books that will ever be able to top this for me. Question 3, The Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. A book coming out next year that you're most excited about. I don't know very many books that are coming out next year at the moment, but one that I'm really looking forward to is Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. This is a fantasy / horror about vampires that have taken over, and there is a religious order of the church that is trying to eradicate them. It sounds absolutely wonderful. I've seen the author talk about it several times. And the author is just such a cool guy. I follow him on social media, and I'm really bummed that I haven't invested a lot of time into his works yet. But I'm planning on changing that. I'm really looking forward to reading this book because I've been waiting for vampires to make a comeback for quite some time. Not just, the vampires that we had when I was a teenager, but I would love to see classic scary vampires make a comeback. Question 4, Humbug. A book that everyone else loves that you can't stand. First author that really comes to mind when I think of this is Cassandra Clare. I feel like I'm definitely in the minority. A lot of people seem to love her stuff. I read her Mortal Instrument series when I was in my early teens, and I enjoyed the first 3 books alright. They were slightly problematic, but I still enjoyed them. But then I read the 4th one, and I feel like it sabotaged a lot of the things that she did in the earlier books. I feel like the first 3 books tied up really nicely, and then the 4th one was just kind of random and meandering. And then I read the Infernal Devices series, and I loved the first 2 books. I thought it was going to become an all-time favorite. And then I got to the end of Clockwork Princess, the 3rd one, the last one, and I hated it. To put it briefly, I think that was the biggest author betrayal moment that I've ever had. I just hated that ending so much, and I feel like it ruined everything that I knew about the characters in the first 2 books and earlier on in the book. I feel like it ruined all the dialogue and the way that the characters communicated, and I just didn't like it. And I was incredibly unhappy with the way that it ended. It once again felt like self-sabotage of a series. Sorry if you like it, that's just my opinion. Question 5, Bob Cratchit. A book that you always recommend. I don't have an end-all be-all book that I recommend because books are so subjective and what people like is completely different. I don't normally recommend adult fantasies because they are sometimes kind of dense and people don't like that sometimes, and I'm hesitant to recommend YA sometimes because it often has romantic tropes, or maybe there's some angst that people might not like. But one middle grade fantasy that I have recommended, I think, the most is Ranger's Apprentice by John Flanagan. There are so many books in this series. I think there's like 14, and there are several spin-off series as well. And we're following this boy who desperately wants to be a ranger, and he's hanging out with his older mentor who's training him, and I love that mentor trope. But also, this is just a really good book to see if you would be interested in medieval fantasy. It's fairly short, but there's a lot of talking about castles and rangers and the knights. It's just a good time, and it's really quick to get through. I haven't read this in quite some time, but I have recommended it to a couple people over the years to see if they would be interested in medieval fantasy. And a couple people have told me that they really liked it, so I guess that's the one that I'll go with. Question 6, Tiny Tim, an underhyped book that you feel deserves more love. For this one, I have A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan. In this book, it's kind of a Victorian-era London, but with an alternate twist. In this world, there are dragons, and dragons is very much a man's field. Killing them, studying them, working with them, that's something that only men do, and we're following the perspective of this woman, Lady Trent, and she is writing us the memoir of her life, and she is telling us about her early love of dragons as a child, and how she desperately wanted to work with them and be a naturalist for dragons, but because it is Victorian-era London, she has a lot of societal pressures to get married and have children and be a housewife. And that's all that she is good for, basically, is how society looks at it. And she tries to go above and beyond to prove herself as a naturalist. And it was really wonderful reading from her perspective. She has a really quiet strength that I really love in characters. She is not your typical heroine where she's incredibly outgoing or incredibly sassy, but she is very clever and she's very smart, and she uses these to her advantage, and she is subtly very strong, and people tend to underestimate her quite a bit. And I loved the relationships that she had with other characters and the dragons. But then again, this is also written as a memoir. So there are a lot of moments and descriptions where it's very much a memoir. There are times when it feels like An Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. So if you're not into that, do be cautious. I can see where a lot of people wouldn't like that aspect. But I think there's so much to love and appreciate about this book, especially if you like dragons or mythical creatures. I've heard a couple people talk about this, but not nearly enough, in my opinion. But this is an all-time favorite of mine, and I'm going to always recommend it as an underhyped read. Question 7. Today, Why It's Christmas. What's a book that always gets you in the mood for Christmas? The first thing that came to mind was The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, especially The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I have read that 4 times now, I believe, and every time I read it, I'm always shocked by how well written I feel the winter scenes are. The way he writes the landscape is gorgeous, and I always vividly remember those scenes in his writing, even though I haven't read this book in years, especially when Lucy first goes to Narnia and she's describing the world to us, and it's really just magical. I don't know how else to describe the way that he has written Narnia, but everything about it is just gorgeous. I definitely need to reread that one soon. Question 8, The Muppet Christmas Carol. Name your favorite book-to-movie adaptation. I have quite a few. Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and Jurassic Park are all big favorites of mine. I pretty much just watched these movies on repeat. I feel like they capture the books perfectly. And in some cases, I feel like the movies are better than the books. I'm sure there are probably a couple other book to movie adaptations that I really love, but I can't think of any at the time. I used to really love The Last Unicorn film as a child, but I haven't read the book, so that's something I want to remedy in 2021. Question 9, tag some people. So if you're watching this, consider yourself tagged. Let me know if you do this video or if you have done it, because I would love to watch it. And thank you so much for tagging me, Jazz. And I'll see you again with another video soon. Have an amazing holiday season. Bye!